Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. In this episode, Alonzo Bowden returns and we talk to Craig Wynn, the author of a new book called The Happy Bachelor. We discuss how the book is different than other books in the single living space, what the term masculinity means to us, and present some tips for being a happy bachelor, including why dating is optional. No bonus material this week, but one request. Please keep telling people about the podcast. That's why the solo community is growing. I appreciate your encouragement. It makes the hard work producing the podcast worth it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Craig Wynn. Craig is a professor of English at the University of the District of Columbia. He researches and writes about societal perceptions of singlehood. He joins us today to talk about his new book, The Happy Bachelor. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great. And we're joined by a return guest, Alonzo Bowden. The winner of Season 3 of NBC's Last Comic Standing, Alonzo is a touring comedian and a regular on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. You met him on episode 24 of Solo, Married to Comedy. Welcome back, Alonzo.
Thank you. Thank you. Alonzo was a touring comedian. He is now a Zoom specialist, unfortunately, but thank you.
There'll be a time where people listen to this and you'll be back on the road regularly. Actually, I think often about you said something in episode 24 where you said, you don't pay me to perform, you pay me to travel.
Yeah, I get paid to travel. I tell the jokes for free.
That's right.
When in my normal business, that's how it feels. Also, that's the harder work. I don't know how much you guys travel. And Peter, I know you travel some. Mm-hmm. Craig, I don't know how much you do. But, dealing with airlines, especially now, that's the work.
Well, it is fitting, though. What's real work is traveling with a family. And the three of us as happy bachelors don't have to do that. Which brings me to you, Craig. How'd you become a happy bachelor? And then once you've answered that, Alonzo, are you a happy bachelor?
Okay, well, there's a very long story behind that. I'll try to give you the abridged version. I spent a lot of my 20s just in and out of relationships, various dating situations, and I was in a long-term relationship for 3 years, and after that, I found it just wasn't really the best fit for where I was going in my life, and it was just back to dating. And I think after one situation, for lack of a better word, came to an end. I was kind of down. I was feeling very down about just being single as a 36-year-old guy, and I just happened to be on Google, and I was just Googling being single as an adult, and I found Bella DePaulo's work, and I know she was one of your first guests, actually. And I found about a bunch of her internet articles and her book Singled Out, and I ordered that. And just this was during the summer, and just that entire summer, I just went down a rabbit hole of just reading about singlehood, just reading a number of Bella's books, her articles, things like that, and it inspired me to start a blog, The Happy Bachelor, where I just wrote about some of my own experiences, observations, or reactions to things I've read just about singlehood. And I found through the act of writing about singlehood, I was able to just come to terms about being a happy singleton. And, I've been doing this for the past 5 years now. Mm-hmm. And the way the book came to fruition, How to Be a Happy Bachelor, is at my old university. I was in a meeting with my department chairperson, and a representative from a publishing company came to our office wanting to talk to us about designing a customized textbook for our first year writing courses, English 101. 101 and English 102. And I was teaching a themed course where students were writing essays, the kind of assignments that you do in first-year writing courses, but they were themed around marriage and singlehood, and they were reading DePaulo's book. And I was talking to him about those courses I was teaching, and I mentioned him that I had been kind of tapping at a book, tinkering with a book about for single men, because a lot of the literature out there, most of the books about how to be happy single that don't revolve around dating are geared towards women, and I had yet to find any that were geared toward men. So I thought, why don't I try to fill the gap? And I talked to this representative about the idea, and he looked at me and he said, "I think I want to publish that." So this is just synchronicity right there. Just serendipity is the right word for me to use in that.
That's great. We're going to actually get back to that idea about what the books in the genre, so to speak, look like. But I want to. So we're on video. We're only going to publish the audio. But it was funny. Alonzo made a face when you said, "I came to terms with my singleness," and I think that's such an interesting way to phrase it, because it really, at its core, highlights the tension that exists being a bachelor, is that it is non-normative, that it's unconventional, that it's something that you're not meant to do unless you come to terms with this "I'm different" idea. Is that where the face came from, Alonzo?
No, actually, the face came from the word singleton, because I'd never heard that word. So that word was kind of funny to me. You know, my experience is different in the sense that I've never felt any pressure to marry. I have one friend of mine who we've been friends since high school, and he married his high school sweetheart. They've been married almost 40 years. There was a time when his wife kept trying to fix me up, right? And he was like, "Just leave him alone. Just leave him alone." But I never received pressure from my family. People who know me just know me as single. As Peter knows, Craig, I'm married to comedy. You know, comedy it's taken up my time, my creativity. I truly love it. She's a demanding mistress. And I started doing stand-up when I was 30. So, you know, you were talking about being in your 30s. In my early to mid 30s, I was working for $50 a night as a new comic. So I'm not thinking about getting married or starting a family, because I didn't want that pressure to cause me to have to get a job. You know what I mean? I was pursuing this dream. But I think I'm lucky that I never had this. Also, I may be programmed this way, because I've talked to therapists about it. And actually a good one who was identifying things, she said to me, you know, she gave me this one personality test, came up totally introvert. And then another thing, a relationship test, and it was like, yeah, your relationship style is avoidance. So it's almost like I'm programmed to go solo.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's really interesting. By the way, look for Alonzo's book coming out next year, Married to Comedy.
I will, for sure. Definitely.
I wish I could take credit for that. That is a Lewis Black line that I heard that I identified with instantly.
Is that right?
He's a guy you should talk to, Peter. Lou's never been married.
Oh, that would be great. You think you would do it?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. That was great. I'm looking for people more famous than you and Neil Brennan to get on the podcast.
There you go.
Yeah.
Lou's your guy.
So Craig, let's talk about terminology. So Alonzo said he had not heard this term singleton before. You use the word bachelor. So maybe if you could give us a little bit of a rundown on the language, the descriptors of people like us.
Absolutely. I'm not totally 100% sure where the term singleton came from. I don't know. I can't remember if it was mentioned in Singled Out. And Bella, if you're listening, you can probably give me some better insight on it. But I'm part of a Facebook group, and I think you're part of it too, Peter. The Community Single People Facebook group, COSPERS for short. And
that's how cool. That's how cool it is.
And the term singleton is, we're essentially a group of people who are single, and it's a variety of us. We, with a lot of different topics come up in in conversation where we talk about how happy we are as single folks, and some people want to vent about about being set up or receiving some kind of a microaggression around singlehood, and we also talk about policies having to do with businesses and jobs and things like that. Those kinds of things that essentially favor married people, that give marriage that sort of privilege. So we talk about those varieties of topics, and I think the term singleton comes up a lot in that group. We just describe ourselves as singleton, and essentially that's just a person who is happy being single is the best definition I can really discern from it. There are also a couple of other terms that we use, and I think from just hearing the two of you talk, you might fall into the category of what Bella would call single at heart, meaning you live your best life while you're single. And it took me a long time to actually realize that that's how I'm really wired. And I think I had spent just a lot of time just when I was a teenager. I just fell into just dating and romantic comedies and things like that, and I just kind of became conditioned to the idea that you have to couple up, you have to partner up in order to be a full human. And I bought into that belief for a long time, and that led me into relationships that I just didn't belong in for quite a long time. And and it took me meeting DePaulo's work and becoming acquainted with the Cospers to kind of do a little bit of self-reflection, to really look inward, to realize that I really am happy as a singleton. Like you said, Alonzo, I'm also an introvert to myself. When I work in a job where I'm working with people all day long, students, other faculty, administrators, and I love the work that I do. I love working with them. But at the end of the day, I just like to come home to my own space where there's nobody around, and I can just enjoy my alone time, and which is very hard to do if you live a more conventional lifestyle, coming home to a spouse and children, and some people thrive in that type of situation. Sure. Some people just do better in that type of situation. But I've come to learn about myself that's just not how I'm wired, and I'm okay with that. I've had to learn some self-acceptance.
I don't want to come home to a place that has any extra pillows. That's like I always think about. This is the perfect number of pillows for this. No extras I have to put on the floor before I go to sleep.
What I wanted to ask you about, Craig, do you really find you have to justify being happy? Like the way you talk about, does it come up that often that people are like, but are you really happy? Or is that, because that's not my experience. So
it used to, and this was long before I discovered singlehood or happy singlehood, and I think I'm just trying to think back to situations. I mean, I remember I've had people try to set me up in the past just based on the fact that I'm single and this other person is single. So hey, the two of you should get together. But in looking back on that now, I might ask, well, what else do we have in common besides the fact that we're both single? Why do you feel that we would make such a good match?
Oh, you two failures.
I think when I was more in my 20s, my early 30s, I used to get little microaggressions from family members and from colleagues, things like that. Nothing too harmful, but little things like, oh my God, you're not married? Do you even have a dog? Things like that. So, and I didn't quite know how to respond to them at the time, but just as I've become more aware of who I am, I actually have found that those kinds of things they don't really happen so much to me anymore. Maybe because I just project a different aura, or there's also the fact that that's become kind of my trademark.
Yeah, you've written a book called Happy Bachelor. I mean, people are like, oh, he's probably not a good candidate for my friend Susie.
Probably.
I mean, some of it is that, Alonzo, you play in a different world as a comedian. I think is part of it. I also think there is something that you get to a certain age as a man, and the questions just stop coming. They're just like, yeah, he's just not into that. and as a result, you sort of get released from it all. I think the ladies really have it hard when it comes to this issue, and it's why there's so many solo books written by women and related to women. Before I get to that, let's talk about the term bachelor, though, because you didn't say the happy male singleton as the topic of your book. You said the happy bachelor. And what I like the term bachelor. Alonzo knows this because we've discussed it. But let's talk about the origins of that term and why you chose to embrace it, to co-opt it, so to speak.
Sure. Well, I know that it comes from from ancient times where a bachelor was it was meant to refer to a man who I think hadn't, and I'm trying to remember the details from the book, but the man had not achieved knighthood or had married, so it was kind of like sort of a knight in training, or a man in training, kind of. Squire,
yes. A young man,
a man in training, and I didn't even know the origin of it until I was researching for the book. I just knew of the term bachelor as the term for a single person. And I actually had proposed to my publisher to change the title of the book to How to Be a Happy Single Dude. I thought that it might be a little more contemporary, but my publisher suggested keeping the title just because of the assonant sound, the happy bachelor. Mm-hmm. So, and I thought, okay, and I was convinced. So I said, yeah, let's go with it. So,
well, I think it's important, so yeah, it is interesting that the term, it goes back to the 1300s. So the first written writing about it is in Canterbury Tales. Chaucer uses the term bachelor. He gets credit for that as far as I can tell. And, it has that sort of slightly negative connotation, like you haven't quite arrived. It's this sort of liminal time in your life as you're achieving before you couple. And I think there's a little bit of that idea that remains today, that, that you're just like, you're not quite complete.
I see it more like what Craig was talking about, that it's just considered an old time word.
Oldie-timey kind of word.
Yeah, it's now you're single. They don't think, people just don't really use bachelor other than like on game shows. Like that's where you hear it.
Sure.
Everyone knows what it is. It's interesting. And I don't know if you guys have ever encountered this, but the gay component of it, in other words, are you undercover gay?
Yes.
With that, with that term. And I don't think it's taken on that meaning. But I wonder about that. Like when you talk about the negative connotations of it, you know what I mean? Like people, because it is unusual, right? It's not the norm. And there are certain people who try to figure it out. Mm-hmm. What do you mean bachelor?
Yeah. In the 50s, there was a term, he's a confirmed bachelor.
Right.
And confirmed bachelor was code for he's gay. And, because that means he will never marry.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's nowadays I think it doesn't have that going on as much. But I again, better term than what the ladies have, because the ladies don't have any good term. The equivalent of bachelor for women is spinster. And ironically, spinster was a positive term back in the day. So it's become negative. That is, that if a woman was a spinster, it meant that she was good with a loom, that she could create clothing. And because it was a valuable skill, she could actually make enough money to live on her own as a woman without a man or without her family. And so in many ways, when you look back on that, spinster is a compliment, right? She's an independent woman. She makes her own money. What's the saying is she brings home the bacon and fries it up in a pan, so to speak. Of course, nowadays, I don't think any woman who is called a spinster would necessarily welcome it. Although, again,
I think even if a woman worked at a loom, she wouldn't want you calling her a spinster.
That's fair. So, Craig, you teach a class that you said is focused on marriage and singlehood, so to speak.
Right. It's freshman composition, those courses, and students have, they write essays, they learn about rhetorical strategies, how to structure an essay, how to structure an argument. But the theme is marriage and singlehood. So as part of their work, they have to write about those topics, marriage and singlehood. And the first assignment was actually reflection. At the age of 30, would you rather be single or married? And they have to justify their answer to that question with details, with examples. And this is at the beginning of the semester, so students have the opportunity to kind of get creative, think into the future. What would my life look like if I were single versus if I were married? And I find that the majority do actually choose the married option, but there are quite a few students who would rather be single because they just want their freedom. They want to focus on their career. And I even had one student, and obviously I can't mention too much, but I did have one student who mentioned that they just they've never had romantic feelings for anybody, which I thought was very interesting. And the student did quite well in the essay. They argued very well, but it just really stood out to me.
Well, yeah, I think that's really, I had a previous episode on asexuality. So about 1% of the population, as far as we can tell, is asexual.
Right.
That they have no interest in intimacy in that kind of way. And then there's this notion of aromantic. These are folks who you don't hear much from them, but it's a very real phenomenon, whether it be you're at a stage in life where that happens. I know of people who go through divorces and then they never have sex again. They never have a partner again. They don't seem interested in it. That's sort of behind them. And then there's some people who just their whole entire life, they just don't feel that kind of attraction, although they may have bonds with people, close friendships, important relationships, and so on. And so it sounds like that student recognized that about him or herself. And figuring, and it's interesting because, like you said, you did this internet search. There's an equivalent of that for asexuality, and that work is also very new, starting really in the 80s for the most part, 80s and 90s, where it started to really pick up.
Right, and that's the thing. I guess I'll just take us off on a little bit of a different direction. I did some research into asexuality and aromanticism as well, and just my own thought is that there are a lot more people now who identify as asexual than they did when I was growing up in the 90s, and back then it wasn't even part of the register. So I think people from our generations, a lot of them got married, had children when they were aromantic or asexual. Just because it was
gay.
So
I mean, this is how much pressure there was to marry, is that gay men and women got married and had children. Right? You know what I mean? So talk about not walking the path that was right for you.
Well, that was also because it was a much better cover story.
That's fair.
And I mean, if you look at if you go back to the 60s, the 50s and earlier, there was no gay. Like, that category didn't exist, so the best cover story was just get married.
Yes.
And live out your life, however, in the closet, right? I mean, that's what they did. Craig, I want to ask you something, because you talk to young people, obviously, as your students. And I see them in social situations, coming out to comedy clubs and going out. It's interesting to me that you said they want to get married, because I don't see them dating traditionally as much as I see them in groups. I even joke about it, like that this generation of guys is so much smarter because 10 of you go out, everyone pays their own bill, and then they hook up with the girl at the end of the night, where we were dumb enough to have to take her out and pay for her food. I was like, you guys are geniuses. So that I find it interesting that they still say they want to get married, because I don't see them socializing in the traditional ways.
Yeah, I find it interesting as well. And I think 40, 50 years ago, it probably would have been every student saying they want to get married by the age of 30. But because there are so many options these days, and more people are opting not to marry, to stay single, or to live, or to get into alternative types of relationships. And I use the term alternative just as alternatives to marriage, that they're becoming exposed to it, so they're realizing more that hey, there are some other paths I can take here, and that's fine. And I did find what was pretty interesting. What I did find is that those students who were, I didn't do an official study on this, but those students who opted for singlehood tend to come from more urban areas, more progressive types of areas. And at the school where I just finished teaching at before I started at UDC, a lot of those students, they come from very conservative households, from from very affluent families where they're used to just seeing just the nuclear family model. So a lot of them, I think, just assume that that's where they're going to go, that's where they have to go. And to be fair, I think if I were 18 years old and I received an assignment like that, I probably would have written for the married option as well, just because I grew up in suburban New York, just surrounded by nuclear families, and that was just the path that I assumed I was going to take, just because I thought that was what was expected of me back then.
Yeah, and I think that to comment, I want to make 3 comments. The first one is, I think it's great that you're able to teach this class. I think that to be able to teach a class that has a balanced perspective on marriage and singlehood, you're doing your students a huge favor, that they actually get to consider it as a choice rather than as destined, and that they're having to come to terms with that they're not going to reach their destiny, to reference back to what you were saying before. The other one is, at 18, I don't want to say you don't know shit, but you actually have to have, it helps to have fallen in love and to have had the heartbreak, and to struggle with relationships, and to see that it's not like the rom-coms and it's not like the fairy tales. That is that you have almost no experience with that kind of intensity and duration of a relationship to figure out whether it's right or wrong for you. And so, asking someone to do that at 30, asking someone to do that at 35, you can imagine someone, there's sort of a reason why someone who might identify as a lifelong bachelor, a confirmed bachelor, not coded, they don't come to that realization typically, at 22.
Right. Right, and I'm amazed by those students who have that realization at that age. I was definitely not as self-aware as some of those students are.
I would say I was ambivalent at that stage. Like, that is, I wanted to fall in love. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted to experience all those things, but I know I wasn't gung-ho to get married, and I know I wasn't gung-ho to have a kid, in part because of my own personal experiences. I didn't come from that super healthy, happy nuclear family. I came from the opposite of that. And so I never associated marriage with my path to living my best life. And I saw it a little bit, I think, like you did, Alonzo, was I thought there was a big world out there, and I wanted to do everything. I wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to work on my career, and I wanted to be an athlete. And anytime I entered into a serious relationship, it created a lot of tension, where I felt pulled away from the things that I was really excited about. And I felt guilty that my girlfriend was sort of unhappy that I wasn't always around, and that I wasn't willing to drop everything in order to spend the entire weekend together.
Right. And I'm very grateful for the fact that I've been able to kind of have some maneuverability in that area. I've had a career that's moved me to all these different places around the country. I got my doctorate in El Paso, Texas. I had my first academic job in Hampton, Virginia, and I just moved to Washington, D.C. 3 weeks ago. And it's just been great being able to live in these different environments and explore all of these different cultures. And there are academic couples who do that, but I know for me it would be a lot more challenging with a spouse and a child in tow.
Yeah, there's a term in academia, Alonzo, called the trailing spouse. And it's essentially reserved for the less famous of the two academics who often has to compromise on a job because a place wants to hire the partner.
Right. Well, that's obvious in the entertainment business. You know, that other than those publicity couples, usually there's somebody quiet in the background, but quite often that person is running the business.
Yes.
Of the famous person's business is run by the spouse in the background.
That's phenomenon in pro sports too.
Yeah.
Where the spouse takes care of the household.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show though, because because when you look at pro athletes, these are guys who in no way should get married at a young age, yet get married at a young age more than the general population. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're a 24-year-old pro athlete, the odds of you staying faithful to a spouse are what? 10%? Yeah. Simply because of opportunity that ordinary men would never see. And this is part of your life. And yet they marry that high school sweetheart or the girl in college because they trust her. And then they start, if she understands it, fine. But usually she doesn't. It ends up in a divorce. We see these cases of how much money they're paying out in child support and this and that. That's another episode. That's
true. We'll save that for another time. Although there's a funny term, which is, I don't know what the term for it is, but like you really shouldn't get that much credit for fidelity if no one wants to have sex with you.
Right. I mean, Chris Rock did that bit about it, right? Like we're as faithful as our
yes, that's right.
We're as faithful as our opportunity.
Yes.
So like he was faithful before he was on TV, and then his opportunities rose as his fame rose, But getting back to what you were saying about the young age, it's interesting. I moved out at 18, started my career in aerospace, right, in that world. I was just what you said, Peter, totally ambivalent to relationship, But then after about 3 or 4 years, and I joke about it now, I just felt like, okay, it's time to find her, And I found this girl and looked like her, felt like her. Ooh, wasn't her. And it was it turned out to be a disastrous relationship. And I think the pain from that affected me for some time. But, and I know another guy who he did the same thing. He said, yeah, I just felt like it was time to get married. So I married the girl I was with. Mm-hmm. And it ended horribly for him. I was going to ask Craig, I don't know, in your experience, like, have you heard that where because of that pressure to not be a bachelor, to not be single, do people just say, oh, I'm 31, I should get married?
I've seen it a lot with a lot of people. I know a lot of friends of mine who because I'm 31, I'm 32. It's like I have to check off this box. This is the path that I have to go through in order to be considered an adult. And if I don't do this, then people are going to think there's something wrong with me. And I know there are a lot of people my age and even older who think that way. I know quite a few people actually who've been in toxic dysfunctional relationships for years, and they're just afraid to leave their partner because they're just afraid of being on their own. It's something that they can't really fathom or comprehend. And I think you had, and I think in the podcast, in one of your podcasts, I think you said something that really struck me, that the only failed that a relationship that ends isn't necessarily a failed relationship, but a failed relationship is when two people who are just miserable are just kind of sticking it out just so they can be in the relationship. And I know a lot of people who are in those types of situations. I've even had one male friend say to me, I hate being single. I hate being on my own. I don't think I can do it. And that's more than likely the reason he is with his current partner. And, and I'm not judging him obviously for it, but there's a lot of that kind of thinking just because of societal perceptions of singlehood, that it's not seen as normal. And if it's seen it's different, then it's bad. So I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. What a terrible reason to live your life is to not disappoint other people. Right. So you don't get to live the life that's best for you because you're worried that other people are going to judge you.
Right.
But in part because you can never make people happy anyway. So they're just judging you for something else. let's talk through that point that you just brought up. So I think, and my point as always is I don't think that being single is right. I don't think that being married is right. I think it's a match, right? It's that you can match your lifestyle and beliefs and values to whatever path that works best for you. Of course, the marriage path is more complicated because you also need someone else to align with you. And so that one is, I think, a lot more complicated. So one reason people do it is because that's just what you do. So I think there's a scene in Fight Club where Tyler Durden's telling a story about, I graduated from school. I called my dad. What do I do next? He said, get a job. I got a job. I called my dad. What do you do next? He goes, I don't know, get married, and so on. And he's questioning this sort of serial progression through life. Check, check, check. Then there's the friend that you just mentioned, Craig, and I'm sure, Alonzo, guys like this, which is they now can't be on their own. That is, they don't actually really have the skills to be on their own. Not only is it that they are worried about being judged, but they just are kind of grown-up children as part of a household, so to speak. And I think that your book, Craig, and some of what I'm trying to do with Solo is built around this idea, which is, how do you take care of business? How do you take care of yourself as an adult and not only just survive, but how do you thrive? And so before we get into that, I want to run down the kind of existing books, right? So as you were saying, there's not a lot of resources out there. So obviously, one of the best places to find out about this is if you have a friend who's a bachelor and is thriving, because that guy, kind of knows what he's doing, so to speak. He's battle tested. These books for women, as I see it, and I'd like you to correct me if you're wrong, they're sort of this like how to be alone book. It's often written by a woman for women, and it's a little bit resigned, I would say. So there's that. There's a solo traveling book. So there's no solo traveling books for men, but there are solo traveling books for women. And I can imagine all the reasons why that exists is just that traveling alone as a woman has more challenges than as a man, issues of safety and so on, especially when you go outside the United States to certain places. Then there's the Bella DePaulo style books, these sort of pop science books. There's a few of these. I'm highlighting some of them in forthcoming episodes of Solo about the rise of single living, the demographic, psychographic kind of reasons for it. And then there's this last book that I find kind of most infuriating for women, which is like, you're single and I know it sucks and here's how to get through it and find the right guy for you. I mean, I think the most infuriating one is like titled, Just Marry Him. Like, he's not perfect. I know he's not, but just get it done, ladies. Stop holding out for something better. It's not coming. The books for men are these sort of pop science style books. Obviously, they're a crossover. And then there is the manosphere books, right? The books written. Now, Alonzo, are you familiar with the manosphere?
Not really. Is this the incel world, that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a complex world, but the incels are part of the manosphere. And Craig, you talk about the manosphere in your book. And so let's give the listener just like a little sort of brief primer on the manosphere, because what worries me about the manosphere is if you're a man and you're interested in thriving as a single man and you go searching, you find the sludge on the internet.
Right, and yeah, the manosphere, and I went down that rabbit hole in my research.
I did too, sure.
There as well, and and there are a couple of movements. One is the incels, which it consists of online groups of men that are essentially angry at women because they won't sleep with them. And I don't know if you heard about a person. His name was Elliot Rodger. He essentially he went on a killing spree at UC. I believe it was UC Santa Barbara.
That's right.
back in 2013, and he recorded this manifesto to YouTube, just ranting about how women wouldn't sleep with him, and he killed all these people, and then he killed himself, and all these incels looked at him as a hero, and he was essentially kind of the embodiment of all of this anger that they were feeling toward women. And there's also the MGTOW movement, men going their own way, and their whole philosophy consists of women are bad. We don't need them. We can go our own way. We're just we can be happier on our own. And I'm not. And they have some good ideas. However, their ideas are based in a hatred of women, and that's not what I'm about in trying to help readers be happy as singletons. Ultimately, and there's even a section about that you can be platonic friends with a female. If you're cis hetero person, you can be friends with a female, and dating doesn't necessarily have to lead anywhere. A date can just be a date, even if it doesn't necessarily lead onto that relationship escalator. You can end up meeting a good friend, somebody who you can network with for workplace, and even if you don't see them again, at least maybe you can explore a new restaurant or learn something new or something like that. So essentially, I'm trying to teach men just how to be happy as singletons without having to develop this whole philosophy of hatred and anger.
Yeah, and I think that part of this hatred, this misogyny, because I agree with you, my time in the rabbit hole with the so-called red pill folks. So they use this sort of matrix metaphor of taking the red pill and seeing the world for what it is. I have to say that so there's these sort of different groups, as you said. The incels are sort of part of this kind of neo-masculines, they've been called. They tend to be younger, and they sort of break two ways. But one is like this sort of rise of the pickup artist community. So what happens is these young men are not having sex. They want to have sex. And so what they do is they just sort of reverse engineer these tactics that make themselves, in the short term, appealing to women. They basically put on a different persona and in many ways trick women into being attracted to them. It's a very short-term focused thing because you can't build a foundation of a relationship on these things. And then these sort of MGTOWs are sort of older guys who maybe they've been burned, with a divorce, or they just have lost faith in the kind of traditional sort of relationship escalator, as you've talked about. I have an episode that's worth listening to about that. And then there's also the one that I think is fascinating is these MRAs, these men's rights activists. These guys are really pissed too. They've often have child custody problems, alimony. They don't see the system as being fair when it comes to divorce. And I feel bad for these guys, and I feel bad for them because they make the world bad for themselves and they make the world bad for women. And I think it's easy to sort of hate on them, but I think most of them, and I think especially the incels, they really deserve our compassion more than our antipathy. I do think that, that shooting and the violence is, obviously is really rare. Most of these guys are just like, I don't know, I sort of identify with them. When I was a teenager and when I was in my 20s, I wasn't good with the ladies. I had plenty of female friends and plenty of friends, and I'm an extrovert, and people thought I was, but I just wasn't that good. And what I want to say to them is, gentlemen, work on yourself. It gets better. Some of this is you're just young.
Yeah, that's essentially what I'm trying to help readers realize through the ideas. And one of the underlying themes is that a lot of these problems, the incels, the violence, may be partially caused by this societal perception that that a man needs a woman on his arm to make him a man, and that's where a lot of these problems with perceptions of masculinity come in, and toxic masculinity, that a man needs to have a woman just by his side, and if the person's not married, they have to be hooking up or whatever, and and that perception, that whole perception just leads to these kinds of problems. I can even speak into my own personal life where I've had friends saying me, you're not married. Oh, you must be doing pretty well out there, hey, with that little little innuendo there. So that's the assumption as far as that goes, that a man, if they're not married, is has to be hooking up as a kind of a symbol of their masculinity, and that's a societal issue. And I'm not saying that that's to blame for the manosphere, but I definitely believe it is a contributing factor.
Indeed.
So there's so many things that we've talked about here that I didn't get to jump in on. Going back to the men who can't take care of themselves, I started my adult life at 18, right? I went to aviation high school, got hired by, Peter knows this, Craig, I'll bring it up real quick because it matters. Got hired by Lockheed Aircraft, moved from New York to LA. Hundreds of guys who I went to high school did this because Lockheed recruited en masse. There were a lot of guys who didn't know how to take care of themselves, and they married whoever their girlfriend was. And we used to joke about it. We knew more 20-year-old divorced guys because they brought this girlfriend from New York to LA to do their laundry and whatever. And it fell apart. And when you talk about a man not being able to take care of himself, I have a lot of women friends, and one in particular, she jokes, she says, Alonzo, guys like you are the worst. Us three, right? She's like, because you don't need a woman, because you know how to take care of yourself. And I'm like, figuring out how to get, and I don't cook, but figuring out how to get food and do my laundry is not a major accomplishment. But there are so many men who feel they need some woman to do this for them. Whereas with me, it's like, and my brother joked about it. He said, Alonzo, you go out with women who think the kitchen is where the waiters go. To me, like, I want to see you in 4-inch heels all the time. I don't care about the kitchen. I want you comfortable in high heel shoes. That's more my thing. But anyway, and women get on me about that, but I don't care.
Can I add something to that, Alonzo? I love that. I love that observation, right? These are men. And they are men. They may be 18, but they are men.
Yeah.
Who can take apart a jet engine.
That's right.
And put it back together. And the idea of not mixing whites and colors.
Exactly.
Is intimidating.
They felt the need to get married.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And this thing about the manosphere. So I knew it, but I didn't know it by that name.
Okay.
And I have to separate you from you, Peter. I'm not forgiving of these guys at all.
Okay.
Because I know too many women who are intimidated by these guys, attacked by these guys. And the thing about these attacks toward a woman, it's a real, like we talked earlier about safety, it's a real thing. Because they are women, right? So they're physically intimidated by this. And these knuckleheads, the more of them that get together, the braver they become. I really don't like this. I just recently in this past week, there was some guy who is a Navy SEAL, and he's on a plane and he shows himself without a mask, and he's like, I'm not a pussy. And supposedly, and I don't know if it's true or not, he was one of SEAL Team 6. He's one of the guys who got bin Laden.
Okay. Meaning
super alpha male, right? I mean, how much more man do you need to be than a Navy SEAL? Who killed the biggest terrorist our country's ever known. And yet you're still so insecure that a mask makes you a pussy. And Alyssa Milano had a great response. She said, by the way, a pussy is strong enough to push out a human. So these guys, I did this questionnaire thing, and it said, what would you tell your 19-year-old self? And I said, I would tell myself, because Peter, I'm like you. I wasn't a pickup artist. I didn't go talk to women. It would always be somehow they initiated it or let me know it. They were interested or whatever, which is what women do. And what I said I would tell my 19-year-old self is, go talk to her. She's shy too.
Yeah.
And that's what we learn as we get older. We learn that she's waiting for you to walk over there, right? And we don't know that as a young. So this manosphere, I get what you're talking about, Peter, and I've heard you talk about this before, but no, I don't give these guys a pass in any way simply because that anger is very threatening to women. It's like, hey, you're not getting laid. Maybe if she didn't feel like you want to kill her, she would be alone with you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree I agree with you that the misogyny is doing no one any good. I agree with you there, and the question just becomes where are the roots of it, and what is the best way to treat it.
Well, I think it's rooted in resentment, right? It's because you start living just like you talked about, Craig, on the internet, and you start believing this. You know, to me, the internet has always been high school, right? Facebook, or whatever, it's high school. So there's the popular guy and this and that, and you believe that this guy is getting laid every time he goes to the club. He's not. He's not, you know. But you believe it and you compare yourself to that ideal. And all you have to do is talk to a woman because she knows he's full of shit. And then, of course, the older you get, the more that comes out. But, I have a big problem with the insecurity of these guys and the threatening behavior as a result.
Right. And I do try to address that in parts of the book where a big theme is to just learn how to be comfortable with who you are, learning how to be comfortable in your own skin, and just develop your own life, your own hobbies, your own interests, your own identity outside of a potential relationship or hooking up or what have you. And I actually taught a course, How to Be Single and Happy, which was a 1-credit seminar at my old school. But students actually do read some of Paulo's material. But there's an assignment where students have to go out to have a meal by themselves. They have to do that. And if they're just trying to avoid the whole Me Too situation, students can bring a buddy with them to sit at the opposite end of a restaurant if they're concerned about safety. But they have to go to the restaurant to order a meal by themselves, and they have to write about the experience there. And another assignment is they have to go to a movie by themselves. And the same situation, they can bring a buddy. And I get a real variety of reactions. Some people take to it pretty easily, and some find it challenging because they're thinking, "Oh, I think everybody's looking at me." But what I do try to encourage them to do is, if you're thinking about the path of singlehood, or even if you're not, it's important to be able to develop your own identity outside of a relationship, and going out to do things by yourself is a very good exercise in that. So, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get with it.
I like that your homework assignment is basically just live Alonzo and Pete's life for a week and see how it goes.
Exactly. I was going to say, just live the life of a comic. Back, when the world was open, it was more unusual for us to go to the movies with someone.
Yes.
Then, like, comics go to the movies during the day alone. Mm-hmm. It's like, what am I going to do? There's a show tonight. I'm going to do something in town. Oh, man, I'm going to see 6 movies this week. We'd be great movie critics.
So I want to talk about this idea of masculinity, because it does feel at times like the notion of masculinity is under attack. So you mentioned the term toxic masculinity. And it's at times, toxic masculinity is 2 words, but at times it feels like 1 word. That is that masculinity equals toxic masculinity. And so I want to get your guys' thoughts about, what does masculinity mean to you? Like, when someone says masculinity, what is the way that you think about it? Because I think that's, as soon as you talk about being a bachelor, that idea of masculinity goes hand in hand with it. You guys are thinking.
No, I'm deferring to Craig.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm just thinking a little bit about this one. I guess for me, the idea of masculinity is just being comfortable with who you are, and recognizing that that just as a person, you're always going to grow and change just as a person. And part of masculinity is it's not even just masculinity. It's just being a person. It's just being just all around a good person. Just trying to just do right by you and right by other people.
Okay, but hold on. That, by that definition, then femininity and masculinity are the same thing.
I think so.
Well, I have I have some ideas,
Okay.
some definitions on it. Part of it is what Craig says, in my opinion, of being comfortable with yourself, with who you are. But a man you never have to prove you're a man. You do some things like physical, for instance, physical strength. Just the fact that, okay, I know I'm stronger than you, so I'm going to carry the suitcase, or I'm going to open the door, or I'm going to do something like that. I think toxic masculinity comes from thinking that because I'm a man, I'm superior to you. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
A man, how to, like we joke about this, my buddy Mal Hall, a young guy, he always goes, I don't know how to do man stuff. I don't know how to jump start a battery or change a flat tire. And it seems kind of funny, but that is something that women expect a man to know how to do, right? It's just a basic understanding. And it's like, they're like, oh, that's old fashioned, but no, it's still true. And it's okay to be chivalrous at times, but not controlling. You see in the old days that men were in charge, and sit down, little lady, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. And, I joke about this. Like I said, I love a strong woman because the stronger she is, the less I have to do, but allowing her to be who she is, that's probably the most difficult thing for men to do now, because women are expanding their role, expanding their definition, expanding what they do. So allowing them to do that is part of being a man today versus being a man in the 40s or whatever, I'll tell you another thing. Please. Culturally, where I have an edge over you guys, in the black community, like my mother used to joke about it during the women's lib thing in the 70s when it was big. And she was like, white women fighting to work. I've been fighting to not work, right? In the black community, women have always had to work and do things, and they kind of had to do things together. So there wasn't that much. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But still, as a man, you protect your woman. Dave Chappelle said something that I thought was very profound, and I'm not going to be able to do it as well as he did. But basically, he said to women, when women are complaining about men and our sexual advances and all of that, he said, don't forget that same thing that drives us to want to bang you drives us to want to protect you. Like, both come from the same place, right? So you have to figure out how to do it. But that is part of being a man. And I know you guys have heard this. I've definitely heard it, maybe because I'm bigger physically and stuff. But women love to feel safe. They love a man that makes them feel safe. And it's not anything you have to do. You don't have to go out and beat up somebody, but it's just your existence. And this is, Craig gets into where your comfort with yourself, where you're not going out proving you're a man. You're not at the bar starting a fight, but you're just comfortable with, the woman feels like, this guy next to me, he got it. He got me. I'm good with him, So I think those are traits of masculinity, those type of things. Part of being a man is how a woman feels around you. And then part of it is just doing things, but the toxic part of being a man is thinking you're in control, that old caveman mentality.
Yes.
And women are only good for one thing and all of that. That's the toxic part.
Yeah, I've been sort of workshopping these ideas more on the podcast than I have with my own writing. But I have this feel. First of all, I do believe you can't have masculinity without femininity. And so anybody who wants to destroy masculinity is just saying we should be feminine, right? There's just one way to live. And I think that's a bit of a problem. And I realize I'm dancing into very dangerous territory as I talk about this. But as I see it, is masculinity. The ideal form of masculinity has confidence plus congeniality, and the idea is that there's sort of an assertiveness, which you've been referring to in some ways, Alonzo, but then also an easygoingness. That is, I don't have to. I can step back. I can have a partner who's going to assert her independence, and so the best form of masculinity is the man who has those two things and can pull those levers as necessary to get along in the world, so to speak. And it is, you use the word chivalry, which I think is an interesting one. This goes back, we're coming full circle, talking about squires and knights and so on. But if you think about a knight, on one hand, they have that obviously assertiveness, confidence. They're slaying dragons. There's nothing more manly than slaying a dragon with a sword. At the same time, he is there to serve his lady, right? He doesn't treat his lady the way he treats a dragon. And that he makes that distinction kind of in the world. And I think, obviously, the world is a much more complicated place than King Arthur's court, in part because women and men have different expectations, right? There are women who want doors open for them and appreciate that. And there are women who feel like that's an affront to equal opportunity. And so, as a guy, you kind of have to figure out a way to navigate that in a way that's comfortable and respectful. And you might have to have some conversations. Yeah, indeed. But I think the thing that is toxic masculinity is when we don't have the easygoingness, when we don't have the congeniality and so on. Toxic masculinity is just the confidence, the assertiveness, the aggressiveness, the strength. And without the balance.
Yeah, there are no dragons left to slay.
That's right. We live in a different world.
And that's what I was alluding to. Just the easygoingness, just being comfortable with that you don't have to try to prove yourself. That you're just you. Well,
Alonzo, your point is exactly right. The not wearing the mask on the plane is an act of insecurity. It's not an act of security. Secure people wear masks. Right? They don't have to prove anything because they know that, they know that they'll be fine. Okay. So this is great. So let's get I want to wrap up by talking about, let me just put a bow on some of this stuff and we're going to end with an idea. So we've been dancing around a lot of like how the world is pushing you away from being a bachelor and away from being a happy bachelor. And that one of the reasons that it's difficult to be a happy bachelor is also then living up to the stereotype of the bachelor, right? That is that you're supposed to be a womanizer and you're supposed to have your bachelor pad and do all these kinds of things, which doesn't seem right. That's not the reason why a lot of guys don't end up partnering up. The idea that dating is sort of optional. Date if you want to, date as you like. You're not dating with the goal of coupling up forever. But this other idea, which I want to return to, is it is a different world. You're not part of a partnership. And it is important to be able to take care of yourself because you're on your own. And you certainly don't want to feel the pressure to partner up because you're struggling to take care of yourself. There are much better reasons to partner up than you're having trouble taking care of yourself. And so I want to ask you what are the kind of basics, and this may sound crazy because we're good at this, but not everybody's good at it. What are the basics of being a man, a single man, and being able to take care of yourself as you see them?
The way I see it is, obviously nobody is born with every single skill out there, but you have to be willing to learn. You have to be teachable. We talked about, Alonzo, for example. You said earlier that you don't cook, and that's cool. And I certainly don't judge folks who don't cook. But you need to figure out how are you going to get food into your mouth, into your house.
It's not food. Food is easy. It's healthy food.
Right. Healthy food. So how are you going to get healthy food into your house? Are you going to be capable of doing the research required to kind of outline a healthy diet? Will you go to the internet? Will you see a nutritionist? You need to know how to kind of navigate those things, on how to kind of increase your knowledge sphere. If you don't know how to jumpstart an engine or change a flat, then you have to be willing to learn, or to at least to read the manual in the glove compartment to figure out how to do that, or to have somebody help you or show you. Essentially, and I think think it ties back into a lot of that comfortable masculinity. Just being comfortable enough in your own skin to admit that you may not know everything, and you may need to seek out a source of education. How are you going to learn how to do those things? And if you need help, then don't be hesitant in asking for it.
Okay, so I want to ask Alonzo about this healthy food thing, but I want to respond to this changing a tire or charging a battery or whatever. I mean, we have a great luxury today, which is if your car breaks down, you can just call a tow truck and pay someone to take care of this for you. Right. No worries. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't even know if that one's even that important, to be honest.
I'm going to tell you why it is.
Okay, please.
And this is something, talk to women, ask women how many women, like you would talk about these incels or guys who can't pick up women. How many women are excited by a man who can use tools? I'm not kidding about that. They see that. It reminds them of their dad or whatever psychological thing goes on. Honestly, Peter, I had this experience with a woman, right? And it's not any woman I was dating. It's actually somebody, she ran a club and I worked at the club. We're going to do press. The car got a flat and she's like, I'm going to call AAA. And I looked at her like, why? And I got out and I took the jack out of the trunk and I take less than 10 minutes, changed the tire. And she was like, that's amazing. I didn't know men could still do that. You know what I mean? So in the time you're waiting for the pickup truck, like a flat is easy. And again,
that's fair. By the way, I can change a tire.
No, I'm sure you can, but
Me too.
But I'm not kidding about this. If you talk to women about this, some women will tell you like, oh yeah, that's like when my man's working on something that, just like a man seeing a woman cook or a woman do something like that, like, on some primal level. But
that's fair.
Now when it comes to the eating thing, what I was going to say regarding the eating healthy and all that, it's also age defined, right? Because, in our 20s, we can eat anything, right? Our metabolism was such that, there's no Taco Bell commercial showing 50-year-olds.
That's right.
Right? But in your 20s, you eat like that. And then as you get older, you learn like, oh, I'm going to have to add some vegetables to the mix and this and that. And you start going to adult places that serve you vegetables. So instead of going to McDonald's, you're going to a Tender Greens or
yeah, you can
Urban
afford
Eats
better food too,
like that.
which goes a long way.
Yeah. But it's also, it's age driven. Laundry. And I learned to do laundry watching commercials, right? Oh, separate the colors and the whites, put it in the machine, throw in the little pod and walk away. Yeah. That's it. It's not like the old days when you really, like laundry used to be a science, right? For our mothers, laundry was a thing. Now it's pretty much idiot proof.
Yeah.
You can, if you want to sit there and add fabric softener and add this and that, you can, but what do they give us? They give us a pod and a cloth sheet. And they're like, throw this one in the washer, throw that one in the dryer. It's like, if you can't figure that out, then we shouldn't allow you out of the house.
I agree.
Right? I mean, yeah. It's so just like you talked about calling a tow truck is simple. These basic life skills they're not as difficult as they used to be. And you guys, I think, will back me up on this. Dating inspires you in some ways, right? Because when you do bring the date home, if the sheets aren't clean, your odds are dropping. So then you learn like, oh, I can't just leave the sheets on the bed for 4 months. I got to wash and change these occasionally and so forth. And it's part of maturing. It's part of becoming an adult, but you will also learn it as a man, as a single man. You'll learn it out of necessity.
Yeah, I want to make a couple comments and then turn it over to Craig for the next sort of topic, so to speak. But I think the key with healthy stuff is you have to get really honest that good healthy food's going to be more expensive, and the idea is that you want to invest in yourself, and that's money well spent. It's the best money you can spend is to invest in your health. The other one is to sort of have these rules and habits. Like when I eat out, I don't order dessert, whatever that might be, or you make your decisions at the supermarket, not at home. And so you don't buy the things that will tempt you and so on. The The laundry one, it's embarrassing that we have to talk about this. You know what I mean? Like, it's embarrassing because I was doing laundry at 14 because I had a single mom who was working 3 jobs. And so if I wanted clothes cleaned, I had to do it. I will give a tip out there, which is YouTube is an incredible resource.
Absolutely.
I remember at one point of time struggling. Alonzo knows me well, so he knows that I like to be very tidy and crisp. And so I was struggling with how to efficiently iron a dress shirt. And so I went on YouTube and I watched 2 YouTube videos, and now I'll kill it ironing a shirt. You know what I mean? Like, and I could have have a housekeeper do it, but sometimes I want to do it. You know what I mean? And I need to do it because I want to look good for a talk, a date, a night out on the town, and so on.
And one other thing regarding nutrition, I'm going to give you the simplest tip I got on nutrition I got from a trainer. She said, mix the colors.
Yes. The rainbow. Eat the rainbow. Mix
the colors on your plate. So you got to have some green, some yellow. The brown might be meat or whatever. You know, you hope that the brown is meat and not a vegetable. You hope. But she said, yeah, it's that simple. Mix the colors up and you'll get a pretty balanced diet, you know, just by doing it. And again, it's a matter of making things simple.
Yes.
You know, but so.
I'll add, I do have an episode called Eating for a Remarkable Life, and I'll make the pitch on that. And it's very similar to what you were saying, Alonzo. Craig, what are some other topics in terms of, my last thing, I'm sorry, is keeping a tidy house. You were alluding to this, Alonzo. I remember reading a subreddit in which some guy talked about having a cardboard box as an end table in his apartment. And it was this sort of passionate conversation where like some guys were like, yeah, totally fine. That's functions in the same way that an end table functions. And my take on that is you don't have a cardboard box as an end table because you want your house to be welcoming to others. And a cardboard box as an end table makes not even a date uncomfortable. It makes everyone uncomfortable. And so there is something about shaping your surroundings. By the way, you should be changing your sheets once a week, that makes your house not only comfortable for you, but comfortable for other people, if you're going to have those other people. I'll stop ranting now. Craig, what are some other things that come to mind for that bachelor who's going to thrive on his own?
So I guess my advice for anybody wanting to thrive as a bachelor is to find your own routines. Find what works for you in terms of eating healthy, exercising, and just keeping a clean house.
Alonzo, do you want to add kind of any pro tips?
Well, I mean, my lifestyle is different. Mm-hmm. So routine, especially when I'm working, you know, like eat before 8 o'clock, maybe, but maybe not. Because if I have 2 shows, then I don't want to eat before the show, you know, so I might grab something between the show. I might end up eating late at night. But again, this is being a comic. The lifestyle is different. I would say if I gave a tip, make it simple. You know, like when we talk about cleaning the house, how much of the house do you use as a single person? I remember I had a 3-bedroom house, and a friend of mine said, your house looks like the model home because I lived in the kitchen, the living room, and my bedroom. Right. I didn't need any more of the house than you know what I mean? Like I'm not all over the house. So again, being a single person, you keep it simple. I don't like cleaning the house. I'm fortunate that I'm able to have a housekeeper come in twice a month and she cleans the house. She dusts and does whatever. I actually get out of the way when she does it, and I come home and like, wow, this place is clean. That's worth that to me. It might be it's not even a matter of being rich or anything like that. It's like, what's it worth to you? Right? So she charges $150. That's worth $150 to me to have her clean the house versus me do it. Because it's not something I particularly like doing. Yeah.
And she's a pro. She does it better than you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, so I would say the thing is to simplify, to tag onto what Craig said about routines. Come up with ways to simplify what you have to do so you know how to do it. And if you need help, get help. Even someone at your bank or whatever can show you how to set up these accounts, and then you stay out of the way. And like you were saying, Peter, you can go on YouTube and learn to do whatever you got to do. Just,
Yep.
and go ahead and try it. Now you may not need to retile your bathroom. Maybe you don't want to start out that big.
Yes.
Maybe you want to start out smaller. I was talking to a woman, actually. She said she was going to repave her driveway. And I was just thinking like, yeah, okay. That might not be a do-it-yourself project, never having done that before, but keep it simple.
Yeah.
That would be my advice. Keep it simple.
Craig, I congratulate you on your book. It fits and fills a much needed gap in the marketplace. And I thank you for spending your time here. Alonzo, as always, it's great to talk to you and see you. Thank you for carrying me even further. Gentlemen, this was great. I wish you the best in your happy bachelorhoods.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life.